Hello, welcome to Quest 3, Module 1, Poetry Analysis with SIFT. Let's look at the directions before we get started. Before reading the poem, review the chart and the questions below. Complete the chart by supplying the information from the poem and respond to the questions that follow. Question 1 asks, how does the meter affect the sound of the poem? Question 2 asks us to focus on how the author uses slant rhyme. Slant rhyme are near rhymes where words sound almost the same at the end and they create a sense of almost rhyming, so a slanted rhyme. Finally, with question 3, we're asked, how do end and internal rhyme schemes impact the audience? Richard Cory by Edwin Arlington Robinson. Whenever Richard Cory went downtown, we people on the pavement looked at him. He was a gentleman from sole to crown, clean-favored and imperially slim. And he was always quietly arrayed, and he was always human when he talked. But still he fluttered pulses when he said, "Good morning," and he glittered when he walked. And he was rich, yes, richer than a king, and admirably schooled in every grace. In fine, we thought that he was everything to make us wish that we were in his place. So on we worked and waited for the light and went without the meat and cursed the bread, and Richard Cory, one calm summer night, went home and put a bullet through his head. Let's take a look at symbols from Richard Cory. Crown in blue, light in blue, and night in blue. We're going to go to our chart and discuss those symbols. The crown becomes a symbol for status, power, authority, and its presence in the poem makes the audience more deeply and more clearly understand who Richard Cory represents and who he is to the people. Light, on the other hand, symbolizes happiness. So when the speaker connects to light in terms of hope for happiness, we're able to more deeply understand how the speaker sees Richard Cory as a symbol for light or happiness. Night symbolizes despair and brokenness. So when the reader looks at night, the time during which Richard Cory actually commits suicide, we can better see how the act of despair is hidden, and night represents the hidden emotion or the hidden conflict that Richard Cory struggles with. We're going to take a look at the imagery next. The images are colored orange. So, gentleman, clean-favored, imperially slim, those all create an image in the reader's head. Additionally, he glittered, a king, calm summer, a bullet through his head. Those also evoke images for the reader. Let's go back to our chart. And when it's connected with clean-favored and imperially slim, creates an image of a man who is impeccable in his style and the way he dresses, and he's one to be admired by those around him. Richard Cory seems to have a visual appeal that's unparalleled by anyone else. When comparing Richard Cory to a king, the speaker creates a picture of power, a person who sits on a throne and has his every need met by someone. He has servants and guards that protect him. And so again, it creates a visual of status and authority. A calm summer night creates a picture of a setting that is peaceful, where there's some obscurity, but there's also quiet. Finally, when envisioning a bullet through Richard Cory's head, there is a picture of violence and death that you cannot easily get out of your mind. Now, let's look at the figures of speech in Richard Cory. Let's look at the alliteration, which is underlined in each line in the stanzas where alliteration occurs. First, in line 1, we have whenever and went. The repeated beginning sound of w represents alliteration. In line 2, people and pavement, the repeated sound of p is the alliteration. When we move down to stanza 3, we see that the alliteration is underlined and that we're looking again at the beginning sound of w with wish and we. Finally, we're looking into the fourth stanza in the first line, we worked, waited, or the repeated sound of w again for the alliteration. Let's go back to our chart and analyze the use of alliteration. In general, alliteration is used to emphasize ideas or concepts. It's also used to tie ideas together. So when we look at the repetition of the beginning sound W in whenever and went, we see that the alliteration is used to emphasize the consistency of Richard Cory's character. Whenever he went somewhere, the same thing happened. Next, when we look at the alliteration with people and pavement, we see that the alliteration in this context highlights the people's position. They're on the pavement or on a lesser level than Richard Cory, and they place him in a totally different arena. Finally, we look at the repetition of wish we were and we worked, waited, and we're able to see that the alliteration first stresses the people's desire to be in Richard Cory's place. Wish we were. And when we look at we worked, waited, it accentuates their persistence and their endeavor to be like Richard Cory. There's another figure of speech used in the poem, and it is anaphora. So we're going to look at that next. Anaphora being the repetition of one or more words at the beginning of clauses, we can see that there is use of anaphora in Richard Cory. It's bolded, and he was always, and he was always. Let's take a look at how it impacts the meaning of the poem in our chart. The use of anaphora calls attention again to Richard Cory's seeming consistency. So when the reader gets to the end of the poem, the situational irony is stronger. The reader is more greatly impacted and definitely more surprised about Richard Cory's inconsistency at that point. Now we're ready to move on.